I'm really happy to be here. I'm so exhilarated to see you all here. This is such a good thing to do, to have fellowship and people of like mind coming together in a social setting like this, and in a state of prayer. And prayer is not just the words, although they're important, but it's our actions. It's what we do. I like many people, perhaps, have many parts of my brain that kind of, sometimes I tend to compartmentalize them, and part of it is, my work at Ryerson. It's academic work. I teach. I love that work, and I'm a media person. I'm a media producer, and I try to do that. And then there's a part of me that has, like most of us, like all of us, this yearning of trying to be connected with God and with spirituality. And it's so wonderful when the Spirit brings an opportunity to bring it all together in one place. And I want to talk a little bit about that today, because at some point a few years ago, I realized that I was doing the wrong thing in my yearning for finding God. I was a cradle Catholic, and I was brought up in a very traditional Catholic family, Maltese by birth, and I had all of the foundations. But you know what? It was great because it was safe, it was wonderful, but I was yearning for something. I was yearning for something more. And I realized you want me to start from the beginning? I realized a few years ago that, in fact, my journey was wonderful because there isn't a specific answer. There isn't a specific destination here in my life. That the seeking, that the searching, that the looking, that the questioning was actually what it was all about. And to me, when I was asked and invited to talk about faith in God in a secular world like Ryerson, and I went, wow, those are pretty tough words to talk about in a place in our society today, right? And to try to define what I mean by faith and what I mean by God is in effect almost impossible to do in everyday life. It's almost impossible to do in my classes. It's almost impossible to do in my production. It's almost impossible to do with many of my friends. Most of my friends are not exactly people that I can sit down and say, come on, let's put up our feet and say a prayer and talk about God, because they'll roll their eyes at me, or they'll be uncomfortable, or there's something will happen. And I'm sure I'm not the only one, and I'm sure that that's quite fine. They're not bad people. It's part of the tension. It's part of the tension. So many of my friends don't agree with a lot of my moral values, and what am I? Who am I? I'm gonna say you're wrong. You're going to hell. Who am I? Or who am I to say I'm not going to be your friend because I don't agree with your attitude towards certain social behavior? What am I going to do? How do I deal with it? Faith in God in a secular world. How do you deal with it? They're uncomfortable words. I know what today faith isn't for me. It isn't about a series of rules that I can use as trump cards to play a control game with other people in society. I can say, I got the answers, buddy. I know. It doesn't work. It doesn't help. It's not what it's about. It's also not about looking at saying, I know God. I know I've got a direct phone line, and I know what He's like. Well, He's this person who listens to me because I've got the rule book. It's loaded. We can't be Christian, we can't be Catholic, we can't be connected if that's how I connect with my life, and that's not what, and it didn't work, You see, God has always, I believe, been most visible not only in the grandeur of creation and in the joy and in the beauty, but in the tension. I mean, think about it. Think about the history of everything we know about Judeo-Christian wisdom. God was most visible all in the tensions of Moses, and the tensions of the Jewish up and down with the challenges that they had as a society and as a group. Think of the Christian of Jesus' own story, the tensions that he was in society, the anguish, not just his death on the cross, but even, nobody got him. I like to point out to people, I can imagine Jesus walking around with his apostles, as wonderful as they were, and every once in a while they'd come up to him and say, so, are we going to be at your right-hand side up there? Is that what it's going to be about? And I can just imagine Jesus going, don't you get it, It wasn't easy. We like to look back and say, oh, it was so easy, it was clear. The halos appeared, everybody had it wasn't easy. The tension was always there. So today, too, we have those tensions. And it's okay. It's okay. We have the tensions of what it is to be human. We have the tensions of the vulnerability of being a human being. We have the tensions of not having all the answers. We have the tensions of doubt, the tensions of uncertainty, the tensions of basically not quite knowing anything 100% clearly. So there are a couple of ways that people deal with that. There's a couple of ways. One way is to escape from those tensions by saying, we have all the answers, it's all certain, and look at me, I am a card-carrying member of something that is so definitive that is not going to let any doubt happen. Or to isolate yourself in a place where you're saying, I'm only going to hang out with people who deal with things like me, because it's safe. I'm only going to go out and have a beer with fellow Catholics. I'm only going to teach people who have Catholic values already in place. I'm only going to have a debate or a discussion about social engagement with people who are already Catholics, because you know what? They're like me. They have the same rule book. Now, don't get me wrong. There's something incredibly wonderful about being with like people, and there's something, the ultimate of that is the sacramental mystery of a communion coming together, and that is wonderful. But in a way, we're called to do more than that. In a way, we have to do a little bit more than escaping from society by not engaging. See, others have a different way of dealing with the vulnerability. They escape totally by saying, you know what? There's scientific proof of everything. Everything is explained by science. Everything is really clear. And you know what? No matter what it is, this mystical sense of a godness, that too is crazy. Their escape is very different. They'll go, I have the answers, and let's not talk about God or spirituality or prayer or this or that. Both extremes, in my opinion, are not engaging with reality. Here we are at Ryerson. Here we are. On the one hand, most of us are part of a tradition that we're taught to believe in certain definitive ways to live our lives in a moral and godlike way, and that is a good gift. We are graced to have that tradition. On the other hand, though, there's almost a sense of discomfort for many of us when we're trying to figure out how that connects with the rest of society. Two polarities. Pure faith, scientific skepticism, or secular skepticism. How can they meet? And that's what I believe Jesus was trying to teach us to do, amongst many, many things. Jesus was not, saying to people, hey, the only way to do something is to do it in this absolute way and go and hit everybody up and tell the Jews that they're bad or this or that. No, he didn't do that. He didn't actually start by saying to us, let's erase all our vulnerability and our differences. He embraced the vulnerability and the differences. He went out and said to the Jews, his own people, I love you, I love the laws, this is great, it is what's formed me as a human being, but we have to reach out beyond that. Right? So he said to you and me, you've got to reach out beyond it in the classrooms of Ryerson and everywhere else. Jesus did not retreat from society. Oh, sure, on occasion he did. He went to the desert to reflect and to be in touch with God in a very private manner. But he went back into society and said, I have to connect with everybody, be they sinners or not, be they prostitutes or not, be they Samaritans or whatever they were. It was in touch. You see, I think that Jesus, while he did form the church and left the church for us to help inspire us through doctrine and tradition, which are important, and the scriptures, which are foundational, also left something even more important, I think, which is a trust in a creator who he called Abba. That trust in God is what he said would redeem us, his Father, and that the love of God, despite the tensions of society, despite our mistakes, despite the chaos, is what was going to hold us and keep us as servants of Jesus in society. Tough as it is in 2012, tough as it was in the year 30. It continues. And as part of a strong tradition of wisdom, which we are, we have a theology that is rich, and it's rich in helping us understand God. And it's wonderful. It's a gift. It's a wonderful blessing. But if that theology puts us in a place in a society where we're either removing ourselves from it, or even worse, where we have an arrogance in dealing with people, then I don't believe that's a holy Catholicism. I believe a holy Catholicism is one that one embraces and says, how do I share, not with the fervor of saying you're bad or you're good and if you only do this, but to engage through love, to engage through sharing, to engage through dialogue. I would suggest that Jesus challenges us all to trust in God in ways that transcend our narrowness as individuals. And I suggest that there are many, many ways for us to look back at his life and realize that he was calling us directly to engage with life and with the people around us and in the world. You know, St. Irenaeus, one of the fathers, said that the glory of God is humans fully alive. The glory of God is humans fully alive. In John 10, St. John said, Jesus brought the light to the world to bring abundant life and to live life well and to the fullest. So how do we do that? How can we live life well and to the fullest if we don't engage with people at Ryerson? And at the same time, how do I do that when I can't actually start my classes and make the sign of the cross? I can't sit down and with my friends on a beer on a Saturday night and go, hey, let's all talk about, Ignatian spirituality. They'll go, what? How do we do it? Well, I don't have all the answers, but I do think that we need to take our messaging of faith in our actions, faith engaged in life, faith engaged in our daily lives, and that's where our tradition, even though it may seem to be marginalized and presented in certain words, will be seen to be at the core of what it is to be a human if it's shown through example and through action. We need to be open. We need to be publicly open with this mix of confidence and vulnerability. I'm confident because I believe I'm doing the best I can. I'm confident because I'm trying to be in touch with who I am, and I'm confident because I know I have a forgiving and loving God that I pray to, but I'm also vulnerable. And just because I'm sitting there with somebody who happens to be a Hindu, a Muslim, or whatever, and I'm kind of trying to relate, I cannot and shall not, will not have such confidence that turns into arrogance that I don't realize that God is also present in what that person is saying. I think we need to also look at the fact that that the joy we find in each other is found in a lot more areas than the tensions. You know, when I talk to my students, and most of you are students, and when I talk to my students, and I do not say, hey, can you put up your hand if you're a Roman Catholic? Oh, who's Episcopalian? I don't do that. I just talk about what some of the core values are that I happen to espouse. I happen to teach media ethics, which I know to many people is an oxymoron, media ethics, but I love teaching media ethics because I also like to say to them, I love making money. Doesn't mean I don't share. Like, it's not a sin to be productive, to enjoy good entertainment, to be full of life, to want to achieve success, to want to have a home for your kids, and so on. But it's also important, I believe, to have a real sense of social justice, to have a real sense of what things that, you know, that are true values that frankly the vast majority of people, when you start talking about them, agree at a core level with so much of our values. Spending time reflecting on that with people is a start. You know? You don't have to sit down with people. I don't have to sit down with people and say, let's pray first, if they're not comfortable with that. But I share values, talk about social justice issues, talk about what we do to the environment, talk about issues about equality, talk about issues about dehumanizing women through abusive sexuality, talk about all sorts of things that are so in common. That's one of the first things I do. The second thing that I would like to share is this, and it's something that I learned with my wife. My wife is also a cradle Catholic, but was very much not a practicing one, and had lots of pain around the church. I realized that it wasn't helping me at all trying to hammer things on her head and say, you know, if I can't explain something, I'll say, well, that's the way it is, and I know that's right because I'm Catholic and that's why I do it. That didn't go far. I think that's wrong. Why? She says, because I'm Catholic and I know that that's wrong, and that's how we're taught, and I can look at chapter 28, you know, whatever. It doesn't work with people who are not Catholic. I mean, you and I could have that shorthand, you know, we can sort of cut to it and say, well, that's what the wisdom, you know, and we're part of it, it feels natural to us, but that's also the teaching of the church, and it's, you know, maybe not. Maybe there's teachings of the church where we're ourselves uncomfortable a little bit with, you know, and that's okay too. It's all healthy. Challenging the teachings in a safe and loving and caring way is part of the church too, right? I mean, the church has evolved. But certainly shutting yourself out is one thing, but shutting other people out and saying, we can't talk about that because, you know, Catholics don't believe that, so stop it. Well, that didn't work. On the other hand, I've discovered, and I do it with my school, I can talk about I think you can too. I can talk about really difficult subjects now. I didn't 5 years ago, 8 years ago, with my wife, with my students, and with my peers, by leaving the labels out of it. So I can talk about something as uncomfortable as abortion. I mean, if you want a hot topic, and you want to be polarized in a discussion, I'm sure you guys will understand that that is one of the topics, right? But I'll tell you, if you want to be polarized even more, is you say to my wife, that is wrong because the Pope said so. That does not work. And forget my wife on that one, but she agrees with me. But you know, but talking about what it is about human life, trying to understand it and talking about it as a human being, philosophically, what it is that you engage in is, you know what? People may not agree with you at the end of it, but they will not have shut you off. So I have those debates a lot more. Catholic values, Catholic faith, Catholic approach, things I believe in, right? And you engage in a way that you do not pretend to have the answers, and you don't agree, and you don't look at a list of things you disagree with. You say, we have a common list of aspirations. My business partner is Jewish. He's the most spiritual person, one of the most spiritual people I know. You know, and I go to his house for Passover, and we talk about it, and he's totally open and understanding of how we have our you know, Jesus' last Passover was so important to us, and we talk about it. He has a respect for it, and I have a respect for him, and not only that, I find God in his prayer, and he finds God in mine. I'm sure a lot of you have friends in different religions, and that's a good way to do it, is to talk about it. Now, in your work, and this is where I'm going to end off, I do it through my teaching, I do it through my stories. You're all here to be professionals. You're going to get jobs. One of the things that inspired me to go back to university and study spirituality and theology is about 10 years ago, I was actually in a board of a public company. And in that public company, we were closing off an LA operation. And one of the board members said, I presented a plan to give people decent severance. And he said, why are you giving decent severance? And I said, because it's the right thing to do. And he said, it's not the law in LA. You can give people 1 week's notice. People who've worked for 20 years can get 1 week's notice in LA, unless they had a contract which said something differently. And I said, it is not the right thing to do. And he said, I leave the right things to do for my personal life. This is business. And I thought that was wrong. I think you can bring your values in. I think you can shape society. You can shape society in ways that actually faith and God are active and engaged. And I think that you can do it through whatever profession you're going to do. And I think you can do it in the halls of Ryerson without having to hit people on the head with it. I will finish off by saying this. I have doubts every day. I have questions about my Catholicism pretty much every day. I have anxiety about death, about my people around me dying. But ultimately, if I trust God, which I pray every day that I can keep that grace of trust, there's a calm that kind of comes over me. And so the thing that really ultimately holds me together is prayer. And I'm not talking about praying necessarily in ways that are rote or traditional. Those work, and the rosary is a wonderful thing and stuff like that. But I actually try to put myself, and I'm a pretty active guy. I run businesses, I this and this. Put myself in that humility of basically saying, I don't know, what the heck's going on, but give me a hand. And at the end of it, it is that trust, and it is that letting yourself go into the hands of the Spirit to guide you along, and that humility that will give you the courage to make things happen in the streets of Toronto, but also to love the streets of Toronto as they are, and to love the halls of Ryerson as they are, with all its differences. Thank you for having me.